U.S. President Donald Trump escalates threats against Iran, saying it has until 8 p.m. Tuesday to make a deal and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or else he'll destroy civilian infrastructure. The president also revealed new details about a search and rescue operation after an American fighter jet was shot down by the Iranian regime. With more on this, the CBC's Katie Simpson in Washington. Hi, Katie. Can you tell us more about that deadline that the president has set?
Yeah, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening mass destruction of civilian infrastructure unless Iran reaches a deal with the United States that is to U.S. President Donald Trump's liking. Donald Trump held a news conference this afternoon where he spoke for quite some time, as Donald Trump typically does. But in the hours leading up to that, Iran had actually proposed a 10-point peace plan to end the war, presented through intermediaries in Pakistan. Donald Trump called that proposal significant but rejected it, saying that he does see that there is some sort of pathway to diplomacy. At the same time, as he says that and talks about, a possible agreement, saying that he thinks that Iran wants to make a deal because of the impact of the American and Israeli air campaign, he is ratcheting up his threats that if there is not a new deal that is reached by 8 p.m. Eastern Time Tuesday, that he will ramp up attacks targeting specific locations. Have a listen to what Donald Trump detailed during this news conference today.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition.
So Donald Trump's statements, and particularly the way he's talked about targeting civilian infrastructure, it has prompted some calls for calm, demands that the violence end. A spokesman for the UN Secretary General said it would be a violation of international law if civilian infrastructure is targeted, given what the massive consequences could be for the people who do live in Iran, who are existing in this moment, in this very difficult moment. So again, Donald Trump seems to be holding firm at this time. It is worth pointing out that this deadline has been extended twice before. Donald Trump originally gave Iran a 48-hour deadline. That was extended by 5 days and then was extended a second time by 10 days. And so now the deadline is set for tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Right now, Donald Trump is positioning himself to hold firm on that, but peace talks allegedly are still happening behind the scenes. Proposals are being made through intermediaries. So again, the situation remains fluid and could change at any moment.
And Katie, what more did we learn about this search and rescue mission?
Yeah, so over the weekend, there was this very significant operation after an American fighter jet was shot down by Iranian forces. We learned for the first time, Donald Trump said it was a shoulder missile launcher that was that fired the missile that hit this F-15 fighter jet. The two pilots, or the one pilot and the weapons service member, they both ejected before the plane crashed. It took American forces about 7 hours to find the pilot. A very significant operation there to track him down during daylight hours. But there was a second service member, the second crewman, that it took quite some time to find. And Donald Trump, along with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, or the Secretary of Defense, he calls himself the Secretary of War, along with the top general and the head of the CIA, they spoke at great detail today about what it took to track down this service member. After he crashed, he was quite badly injured, according to the White House, bleeding quite profusely. He had to climb up some rugged terrain, some mountainous territory, to try and hide himself into an area so that he could not be found by Iranian soldiers and Iranian forces that had put a bounty on his head. And so as they were trying to track him down, he managed to hide in sort of like a cave area and had a beaker, a sophisticated beaker device device that was able to contact and reach out to American forces, who then carried out this very dramatic rescue mission to pick him up and take him to safety. They had to leave some of their aircraft behind because the sand and terrain was so difficult they couldn't take off. So the Americans had to destroy some of the equipment that they left behind because they didn't want it to be in Iranian hands. This taking place over the Easter holiday weekend, and that is what Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, compared it to.
You see, shot down on a Friday, Good Friday, hidden in a cave, a crevice, all of Saturday, and rescued on Sunday. Flown out of Iran as the sun was rising on Easter Sunday. A pilot reborn, all home and accounted for, a nation rejoicing. God is good.
And that was Pete Hegseth there. And so again, those new details about the rescue mission. And again, we all wait to see what's going to happen as that deadline approaches. Thanks for all those details, Katie. The CBC's Katie Simpson in Washington. For more on this, I'm joined by Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former Middle East peace negotiator. Thank you for joining us. Now, Trump has deemed tomorrow, quote, power plant day and bridge day. If Iran does not open the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. Eastern, how significant of an escalation could this be?
Very, assuming the president goes through with his threats to destroy the country, I think he said within 4 hours. Look, I think that's really an important question. The real question, I think, is whether or not any military option that the U.S. undertakes at this point, whether it's inserting ground forces, and I wouldn't rule that out, or a massive deployment of American strike capabilities on bridges, power stations, infrastructures, desal plants, electrical grids, whether any of that is going to facilitate an end to this war. There is no diplomatic option right now. And in my judgment, almost nothing that I could imagine will change Iran's risk calculation at this point. So that's the real problem here.
And now Trump has justified these attacks on infrastructure, saying that Iranians are willing to have that pain in exchange for freedom. What do you make of that argument?
I mean, I think that's the president's conception. And I'm sure there are probably more than a few Iranians that welcome the possibility that an American involvement, even if it's a military involvement, could somehow bring about a better future. But what is clear 6 weeks in, and this is the beginning of the 6th week of this war, is that the regime is not cracking. The highly enriched uranium has not been retrieved. The straits, which were open on February 25th, are not closed. They're simply closed to what the Iranians believe to be hostile entities. And the international economy, global economy, helium, fertilizer, even food imports for a region of 60 million people is wrecking, or is going to, if this continues, going to do extraordinary damage to the global economy. And right now, there's no way out. What you saw at that press conference was the tactical brilliance, in my judgment, of the American military to retrieve these pilots against those kinds of odds. But juxtaposed to that was the strategic improvisation, or I would argue, having voted and worked for Republicans and Democrats alike, strategic incompetence on the part of the administration. How is the United States going to get out of this war? Well, that is the question. And there is no answer to that question now, not from the president, and clearly from no one else, certainly not from Iran.
You mentioned that diplomacy is not the solution right now. Well, it can't be if they're not actually talking and anywhere near on a solution. What I am wondering, though, in terms of polling by Americans, they are also unhappy with this war. And domestic pressures, whether we're talking about affordability in terms of gas prices or other, at this point does not seem to have pressured this administration to change course. So when you talk about getting out of this war, ending this war, if that kind of domestic pressure
doesn't seem to be doing it. And are you surprised that it hasn't done it yet?
No, because when has domestic pressure ever constrained this president? Americans will get a chance in November to decide whether they want to keep the Republican majority in the House or not. But when has domestic political constraints ever, frankly, mattered to this president or succeeded in constraining him? The courts have constrained him to a large degree, even the Supreme Court on critical rulings. But he appears to be only driven, and he made it very clear to the New York Times in the wake of the Venezuela operation. The only constraint, he told the New York Times, was the morality that exists in my own mind. This is a president, and I've worked for administrations from Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, and you can throw in Obama and Biden as well. This is a president who is driven by power, by money, and by glory. And he's not subject, nor is he affected to any large degree by what might affect other previous American presidents.
I really appreciate your time. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Aaron David Miller with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.